This is Divine Lifestyles with Tara Magalski. What is a divine lifestyle? Passion, purpose, and living in alignment with your truth. Thanks for tuning in to Divine Lifestyles, feeding your spirit, mind, and body. I'm your host, Tara Magalski, and today's episode is sponsored by Complete Mind and Body. Complete Mind and Body aims to enlighten the mind, body, and spirit through the power of holistic living. And today's guest is a good friend and fellow colleague of mine, Lisa. Lisa is a model and an actress, and we actually were working one day together modeling, and we got to talking, and that conversation led us to the topic that we are going to discuss today. And that topic is living with a parent who is an addict and how that affects you. Now, Lisa and I both share the same struggles. We both have fathers who are addicts, and we found a lot of comfort in talking with one another. And I thought that this was a great conversation to have on my podcast because I thought it would be useful for people who are listening to feel comfortable about sharing, because I know many people feel ashamed about this topic. And I think really if we all share our stories, then maybe we can really get to a deeper state of healing, or possibly give someone else who's struggling permission to be honest. So on that note, thank you, Lisa, for being my guest today.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And I just kind of wanted to back it up a little bit, and I'd love for you to just kind of share your story about, because I know that you've been in the industry for a while, you've been acting and modeling, and I just would love to hear a little bit about where you're from, where you came from.
Okay. Yes, I'm originally from Southern California and just recently moved to the East Coast about 2 or 3 years ago, but my whole life was based in Southern California. So this is all new to me, and I'm loving it. So this is my new home.
What made you want to move to New York?
It wasn't a plan. It happened. I visited and found that I started working, and next thing I know, I live here. So it just was a very gradual process.
Okay, I love that. I wish that my move to LA would be that easy. I can't see. I'm like, I want to move there. I wish that just happened. But
that's kind of how I work. I work best with baby steps. So when I don't just dive right into something, I can handle it better. So for me, it wasn't planned. I just was visiting, and next thing I know, I'm bringing stuff from California over to New York and calling New York my home.
I love it. I love it. Well, New York is pretty awesome, but I do really like the weather in LA.
Of course. Of course.
So is your family here, or are they still in California?
They are all in California. That's the hardest part. But at the same time, it's been easier for me to deal with what we're talking about because of the fact that I don't live there anymore. So
yeah, so let's jump right into that. Tell me a little bit about how it was for you as a child growing up in a home that had a lot of drug abuse.
The funny thing is, up until recently, I thought it was normal. I mean, I knew that a lot of my other friends didn't have the same, they didn't have to deal with what I had to deal with, but I was just so used to it because that's all I knew. So as I got older, I started realizing how it's affected me. And that's when I look back and I think, gosh, I had an awful, awful childhood. But at the time, I had my sister with me, and my mother would try her best to keep our lives normal. So at that time, I didn't realize how bad it really was. But looking back, it was really bad. Yeah, my father's been a drug addict all his life. Well, not all his life, since he was in high school, but all my life. So that's all I knew. I had to deal with, the fighting and my parents fighting because my mom would be, she didn't do drugs, so she would always be monitoring him. And when she'd see that he was on something, that would just spark a huge fight. And me and my sister would hide in the closet and cry. And, that was our life. That was normal to us.
And what types of drugs does your father do? And he still is doing them, correct?
Correct. Yes. He actually got kicked out of high school because he was on heroin. And so that's his main drug is heroin. He's highly addicted to it, to the point where if he did stop, he would die. So right now he's on methadone, which is a legal liquid heroin that you get from a clinic. And he has been abusing heroin since since I can remember. And a part of me even wonders if it had any effect on me as a child, like, internally. But
because he was using before probably when you were conceived.
Exactly. So I wonder about that now as well. I even joke, when I when I mess up or make mistakes, I just say, my dad did drugs. I always try to make light of the situation, but it's not something that should be laughed at. But I try to throw humor in everything in my life because,
I can understand that. Just to connect the dots for our listeners, Lisa and I just had this conversation probably about 2 weeks ago while we were on a modeling job. And I've been struggling as well with a father who's been smoking crack for the past 10 years. And it's been really hard, I guess, for me to come out and say what's really been going on, because as you know, Lisa, I told you I lost my mother 6 years ago to pills.
Right.
And so it's been 6 years of trying to figure out, oh my goodness, I didn't live this life that I thought I was living. I actually thought everything was quite normal. And as you peel back the layers of the onion, it's not really that normal. It's actually quite dysfunctional. And just like you, I've been spending a lot of time just looking at my past and my patterns of behavior and seeing how that's really affected me and the decisions that I make today. So I have to get very, very mindful and conscious of the decisions I make and what's motivating me.
Right.
Yeah. One thing that I noticed, Lisa, and we were talking about this, is that, we really have, you and I both are very similar in the sense of we have the same sort of career path, and we realized that even though that our parents were using drugs, that we really were not going to allow that to affect us. So I really want you to talk about that. Like, was there a moment for you where you realized, like, this is not going to be my future?
I've been back and forth, and I didn't really just have one moment. No, I didn't. But I've always been the black sheep of the family. I have an older sister who, she got into drugs in high school, and I was able to see that and the effect it had on her and learn from that. So I think that has a lot to do with my decisions. But I also made some bad decisions in life as well. I partied, I drank. I never really got into drugs. I tried a few little things here and there. I mean, nothing's...
We all have.
Right. Yeah, and I'm so lucky that I didn't become addicted, because that's all it takes is just trying it once. So I have been so lucky that, I was able to just, let it be a one-time experience, and that's it. I think in the back of my mind also, I just wanted to avoid becoming an addict. So I knew how to control it. I think actually I do have a moment where I realized this isn't the life I want. I had a relationship with somebody who wasn't quite like my father, but he had characteristics that reminded me of my father, with his drinking patterns, where it would cause problems in the relationship, and we would be back and forth. And the final straw was an incident that occurred because he drank too much. And that's when I realized, you know what? You're never going to change. My father hasn't changed. My mother kept giving him chances. I'm done. I don't like the way this is going. I see a pattern here, and I don't want to be having to, my father, he would be sober for a good 5, sometimes 10 years, and then he'd go right back. So that was a fear of mine, that if I gave this guy a chance, he could just go right back another 10 years. So I was really... I was very careful about that. So I ended that relationship. And I think that was one of those points where I realized this isn't what I want, because I saw that even though I thought I loved this person, that I could end up in the same situation that my mother is. So that was a major turning point for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that your father's drug abuse has affected you when you started dating guys? Like, were you not trusting of them? Were you fearful to get too intimate or let someone in?
No, that's what's surprising. No, I actually think in that area I take after my mother, who was too trusting. So I was too giving. I took chances. I gave people the benefit of the doubt. So it's interesting how some people go one direction and then I went the other, where I just let everyone in. But yeah, I think I got that from my mother because she's a very forgiving person. She's very trusting. She has been with my father this whole time.
Wow.
Up to this day, she's taking care of him. And I think, yes, I took after my mother in that area.
Yeah, so when you realized in that moment that this was not going to be your future, and when you were dating that gentleman who was drinking, did you just make sure from there on out that you were only going to date people who were the exact opposite of your father?
I think subconsciously, I didn't go seeking out people based on that, but I think I, in dating, I knew instantly whether there would be a connection, not just physical and the things that I look for in a man, but just, I think, like I said, subconsciously, I think I knew just to just count that out. Just, I wouldn't
Exactly.
even deal with that.
Yeah, I always was looking for guys who were the exact opposite. So if I had an image in my mind, blue collar worker, 5'10", dark hair, I started thinking I have to date someone who's 6'2", who is in finance, like the complete and utter opposite. That was my way of kind of protecting myself.
Right. So you were more aware. I wasn't. I don't think I was in denial. I just think that I I heard later on in life about how a lot of women will end up with men that are like similar, have similar traits as their fathers. So once I realized that, I thought, whoa, I started looking at my history and realizing that that was kind of true in my experience. So that's when I think I did go out of my way to, not consciously though. I think I just went for, I think I was just drawn to the opposite after that.
Absolutely. Now, how big of a play of faith do you think? Do you think that faith had a really big, influence in keeping you on the right path? Or do you just feel that you were very lucky?
I do think that faith had a lot to do with it. I don't usually get into these talks, but yes, I have my own faith and I pray constantly. And I actually have some stories about when my sister and I were younger and we would run across the street and pray at the church together. My parents, I'll just tell you the short version. They were fighting. My dad had a knife on my mom. Me and my sister ran across to a church and started praying really hard. And it was really late at night too. And then we came back home and they were sleeping. And so that was just one experience when I was a child that really, really just made me realize that even as a child, you have faith. And it followed me into my adulthood. So yes, of course, that definitely plays a huge role in it.
Yeah. I think that a lot of times when you do deal with so much trauma as a young child, you are drawn to having more faith, or at least to calling on when you feel so out of control, like the situation is so out of my control. I think that's the time where we really, delve into our faith.
Absolutely.
And I have to tell you that I still pray every single day that my father has some sort of awakening in his own heart. So, because I don't want him to die in this lifetime without, knowing God, or because I feel that, I don't know about you, do you feel that most drug addicts don't have a higher power, or they don't have a lot of faith, or they've kind of like lost their way?
No, not necessarily, because but my father, he's the reason why I have the faith that I do, because growing up as a child, he would read us, stories, and we would go to church together, and he would pray with us. So he's the one who brought that part into my life. So that's what doesn't make sense to me now, is how he brought that into my life. Then how come he's not, he's not using his faith to better himself? I don't understand.
Yeah. So what do you think it is? You've been, watching this your whole life. Do you have any insight to why you feel that your father is still using?
I think, like they say, it truly is a disease. And, this is the way he's been. And I can't put myself into the mind of a drug user, but from what I read and hear, it is a disease that it's just like cancer. You can't control that you have cancer. You have to get treatment for it, as a drug addict would have to get treatment. So I think it's truly a disease, and you have to want help. And that's the problem with my father, is he doesn't want help.
It's interesting. The more I think about it, because I ponder this all the time, I think, is it a mindset shift where you're so stuck, where you don't believe, when you feel like you're in quicksand, or when you're having a really bad day, right? And then everything just is negative. You wake up negative, and then the rest of the day is bad.
Oh, yes.
I always wondered, is that what it's like living in the brain of an addict, or my father per se?
Right.
Is that what it is? Is that he wakes up every day with zero hope, zero faith? And then from there, he makes decisions from that hopeless place. And it's almost like he's stuck, and it's this record, because every time I talk to my father about, why he's using, will he go back to rehab, he tells me the same story over and over and over again. And it always comes down to, I wasn't loved. My mother didn't treat me the same as the rest of the kids. It's always this victim story of why he is now abusing himself.
Oh,
and it's
absolutely.
almost like this is his way of masking that pain. And I say to him, okay, I hear you. I hear that. But can we look at this from a different prism? Because I understand that's what you think has happened, but maybe that is not what really happened. How can we get outside of this and look at it from another angle? And, for me, when I talk with him, it's as if he's stuck in this rut. And it's like he cannot get enlightenment or like a higher consciousness. He's just like, life isn't going to get better. This is my life. I was dealt a really shitty hand. This is the way it is. And in turn, I'm not lovable. So I'm going to hurt myself. So really what I think and he doesn't have any faith in his life. I just pray that maybe, God gives him a spark of hope inside of his heart to let him know that he is loved and that there is another way. Do you hear what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And I feel like my father always gives excuses as well. He actually grew up with an alcoholic father, and his mother died from a drug overdose. So he comes from a family of drug and alcohol abusers as well. And he always plays victim as well. But we all come from, you and I are examples.
Many people come from dysfunction, right? But
exactly.
Isn't it, we have a choice that we can make to either go down that same road, or we can make a choice to better our lives. And this is where I just want to tie in faith, because for me, I was brought up with faith in my life, and I'm not a big fan of organized religion, but I do love God, and I do have a higher being, and I do pray, and I believe in the power of the Holy Spirit, and I believe in miracles because I've seen them. But I believe faith is such a major component when it comes to igniting that spark inside of you. I think that most addicts do get stuck, and I think a lot of times it could be bipolar, it could be some sort of chemical disease or reaction. But I've been working with some sober living facilities, and what I'm realizing is that a lot of people don't have a passion or a purpose.
Right.
They don't really know what they're here to do. And for me, that that's very much in alignment with faith, because for me to find my passion and purpose, I had to get very clear with my higher purpose and God for me. What does God have for me here? What can I do to serve? And I really think that's why I've been able to lead a healthy life, is because I was so devoted to why am I here? Because when bad things happen, right? Like when my mom died, all of a sudden one day out of nowhere, and I had to start contemplating the bigger questions in life, my life changed for the better. And I mean, yes, it was very depressing, but I was able to open up my world to something outside of myself, which was the beginning of my real transformation. And knowing that my father was still using, it's been 10 years, I really think that faith is what's kept me on track.
Yes, that makes perfect sense. And I'm sure that is why. And more people need that in their lives. My father, he's had so many close calls with death, and he was in the hospital. He's not only addicted to drugs, but he's got diabetes and hepatitis C. And he was in the hospital last year and almost lost his foot. And I recall him saying, "Where's my blessing? Where's my blessing? When am I going to be given another chance?" Well, he was given so many chances, and he still has yet to see that. And I don't understand how some people can have so much faith, and others, they just, like you said, they get stuck, and they don't have a purpose. They feel they don't have a purpose in life. I think that does have a lot to do with it. And it's frustrating when you, as a family member, want to help them and let them know that, you can change, and they don't see that. And it's very frustrating to get them to see that.
So what do you think has been for you the motivating factor to take care of yourself? I mean, is there something that you do every day?
Absolutely. Because of the way I grew up, I have a huge amount of anxiety, and I was depressed years ago. Before I moved here, I found that my depression has subsided, and I am a very anxious person to this day. And I did try getting on medication, and I just realized, I don't like that something's controlling my body. For some, it works. For me, it didn't make a difference. So I just started doing natural things, exercising, eating healthy, spending time with positive people and doing positive things. And that truly is what helped me. And just realizing there's nothing I can do. I've tried everything, to help my father. He refuses help. He even would threaten. He would threaten us sometimes. So I thought, you know what? I've done all I can, and I need to work on me now. I've lived my whole life, in this dysfunctional family, and I love them, but I also love myself, and you have to take care of yourself. So I've just basically been doing things that make me feel good. And exercise is my drug. It really is. After I exercise, I feel like
You feel
like,
amazing. I know.
yes.
It's the same thing with me. That's where I'm getting my serotonin. That's where I'm getting those that I almost feel high sometimes when I work
Exactly.
out. I'm like this, but it's just that euphoria feeling. And, I think it's really important, especially if you are dealing with a lot of trauma at home, that you really have to put yourself first, and you have to be a bit selfish sometimes.
Yes.
And you have to make sure that your spirit, your mind, and your body is fed first. Because, as you know, dealing with a drug addict or that codependency, it's very draining. It can suck the life out of you.
Yes.
And it's really important that we really get clear with, we can love our parents, we can love drug addicts, but we also have to love ourselves even more.
Right.
And it just comes down to what I believe. It comes down to honoring your body and your temple first, so you have something that you can offer to someone else.
Absolutely.
So for anyone who's listening, could you just if someone was listening today and saying they were struggling with either drug use themselves or with a family member, is there any advice that you could give them?
You just have to take care of yourself. Of course, if you have a family member who would like help, then definitely help them. There's rehabilitation centers, even intervention. I've looked into that, but the problem with that is the addict has to be willing to go into rehab. They have to be willing. And that's the hard part for my father, is he's not willing. He refuses help. So there's nothing we can do on that end, but you really do have to take care of yourself and put you first, because that's what's most important, especially if you've been dealing with this your whole life. It's time to just take care of yourself.
It's the saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you cannot make them drink. And every single one of us has our own journey. And when you can get to a place of detaching yourself from that codependency and saying, you know what, this is their journey and I'm going to do everything that I can. I mean, it took me many, many years to get to this place because, I mean, even in June when I was helping my father sell his house, my family had to come to me and say, you're not allowed to see him anymore, because when you're around him, he is sucking the life out of you and you're not the best version of yourself. And I said, whoa, really? I didn't even realize. He said, yes, throughout this process, you've been very, very hurtful. And I don't even realize, but it's like just being around that negative energy and that low vibration. You have to really make sure that you're surrounding yourself with positive people at all times and cutting off those relationships that are no longer serving you.
I couldn't agree more. I'm nodding my head here because everything you're saying is spot on.
So tell us a little bit more specifically about how you feed your spirit.
How I feed my spirit. Well, I don't practice religion. I do have faith. I pray. I am surrounded by that. My mother-in-law is very faithful, and I just am now surrounded by the most positive people that I've ever been surrounded by, and they feed my spirit. Ever since I've left home, I've just been living this new life. I feel happier than I've ever felt, and it's because of the people that I'm surrounded by. I'm married now. My husband is the most positive person, and he just brings so much joy to my life, and I couldn't be happier. And he is just a great example of someone who just brings out the best in you, in me, actually. Mm-hmm. But he's brought so much happiness into my life, and he's helped me deal with my problems with my family. As a matter of fact, in the beginning, he would always say, you know, you need to do something. You guys need to do something. Your father is going to die. If you don't do something, you know, you're going to look back and think, you know, I should have did this. I should have did that. It's in blame. You know, he didn't want me to be blaming myself if I hadn't tried. So I had to explain to him that we have tried everything, and he just didn't see it because he wasn't around, you know, during the whole process, of course, in the beginning. And now that he has seen it, he understands. He did say, you know, I see that you guys have done all you can do, and your father just doesn't want the help. He isn't willing to get the help. So you've got to do what's best for you. And yeah, it just takes sometimes having to be in the situation to understand, because some people who have never even had anything close to that in their lives just don't understand until they've, you know, been around it
long enough.
Yes.
So what are some ways that you feed your mind?
Well, like I said, I do try to educate myself. That's another problem. I did not get the proper education after I graduated high school because my parents couldn't afford to help pay for school. So I had to get a full-time job. So now I find that I am trying to further educate myself. That's how I feed my mind. And just by living a healthy lifestyle and being positive and being around positive people. And I do talk to my parents. I call them, and I just try to be positive with them, and I let them vent. That's all they do when I call. And I just have to realize that that's the way it is. And the best I can do is just be there to listen. And
cover them with love and pray.
yes, I send them presents every year and I pray for them. And whenever my father tells me, what he's been doing to try to better himself, I just, rather than be negative, because I do have some people in my family who are negative about it, who just don't trust that he will change. And I just, basically tell him that I'm proud of him whenever he does try to make an effort. But just me feeding my soul is being surrounded by positive people and just being positive myself and being healthy, living a healthy lifestyle.
Like you said, feeding your body by,
Yes.
working out and eating good foods for yourself. And you really see how it is all interrelated, right? That
yes.
You must take care of yourself, mind, body, spirit, so you can have that balance, especially, I think everybody should be doing this, but especially I think you learn this quite young when you come from such dysfunction that you really need to take care of yourself. And I do want to commend you because you've had a really tough upbringing. And I know you even told me that you were homeless for a while and you always were moving and you were moving quite a bit. You didn't really ever have that stability of staying in one school, but you have really done an amazing job. And, Lisa's been very successful in commercials, in the modeling world. And one last question is, what do you think keeps you on this path of healing? What keeps you on this path to just keep moving forward?
Just seeing the results. I'm so much happier than I've ever been, and I know that I must be doing something right. So whatever it is I'm doing, I just keep on doing, because I have never been happier in my life and than I am now. So I just continue to be positive, like I said, and I am now doing things that I wasn't able to do as a child. I didn't get to take dance classes. I didn't get to be a part of any sports teams. I was never in any clubs because we couldn't afford it. We were always moving. So now I'm doing all those things, and it's never too late. It's never too late to change. It's never too late to try new things. So that's what I'm doing now with my life. I'm just trying everything that I never, that I've always wanted to do. And just
You're living your passion.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for taking the time today to just come and talk a little bit about your story. So powerful. And someone who's listening now, tomorrow, 5 years from now, might just find a little bit of healing in what we just spoke of. They might just feel, hey, I'm not alone.
Thank you for having me.
For anyone who's listening that may have any struggles or questions, comments, or concerns, you can reach out to me directly on my website at www.taramagalski.com. And make sure you do subscribe to this podcast and rate it and like it, and share it with your friends if you think it's useful information. And I'll see you next time. This is Divine Lifestyles with Tara Magalski. What is a divine lifestyle? Passion, purpose, and living in alignment with your truths.